Hello everyone, welcome to the show. Who can believe it? We are now on episode 18 and we're really starting to get into the money. And indeed, one show after this and we will have finished boot camp and we can move on to some stuff that is going to be even more powerful for you. So what are we talking about today? Well, probably a bit above my pay grade, but I'm going to do my best to explain what spirituality is and some ideas for you to ponder. So how did our journey take us here? Well, on the last 3 or 4 shows, I think, we started to go deeper into the unconscious mind. We talked about Carl Jung's view of the collective unconscious and how we are all connected, not only in the present time, but through all of our ancestors as well. Now, if that's too much of a mouthful for you to swallow, hopefully at least you can accept that there is some universal wisdom out there, there is God out there, there is something that we can call on. And it might just be, or one option for you to consider, is that it's the recognition that our unconscious mind is vastly, vastly more powerful than we give it credit for, way more important than our conscious mind and powerful. And if we can just find ways to listen to it, whether it's through Carl Jung or anybody else or anything else, then that is going to have a huge effect. Now, the shows after that were addressing that very question, how can I connect to my unconscious mind? And we talked about things that I know a little bit about, mindfulness and meditation. I've been doing them every day for many years. It doesn't make me an expert, I'm still learning, but I definitely know the benefits that I've got from it. The show after that, I talked about hypnosis, because hypnosis is a subject that I'm really fascinated by. I'm pretty good at it, probably the only thing that I'm really good at, and I find it powerful in myself and in the clients that I see who come from literally all different walks of life. And then it was a question from a viewer, a subscriber, that gave me a bit of a wake-up call. And they said something about dreams. Well, I've been interested in dreams for many years, and I know how important they can be, but I'd never actually spoken about them before, and I thought I'd better make up for lost time. So we had a program about dreams. And so there we are. Now we're ready for spirituality. So where has this come from? Well, it's come from what I talk to with all of my clients. At some point, I say, peak performance, getting lucky, call it whatever you will. It's that sweet spot where you can combine mind, body, and soul in perfect balance. So lots of questions follow on from that. Well, mind, that's what we've been talking about for the last 15 weeks, and we're now on show 16. So there's plenty there for you to catch up on if you missed any of the shows, particularly the more recent ones. Body, we haven't really talked about that at all. I might do in the future. All I know is that it's important that we look after ourselves. I mean, our body is a wonderful machine, but just like any bit of advanced engineering, advanced evolution, or advanced creation, it needs to be looked after. So, what you eat, how you exercise, the way you take your recreation, all of these things are important, but that's for another day. But today is soul, because soul is spirituality. Spirituality means many things to different people, so I won't give you any dictionary definitions because there are so many of them. Suffice it to say that in previous times it used to be very much a religious term, and that spirituality came from religion. More recently, with New Age thinking and new ways of thinking about everything, the definition has broadened considerably. So many people consider themselves to be spiritual, and they're not religious. So you don't have to be one or the other, you can be both. It doesn't really matter, as long as you know a little bit about spirituality and possibly a little bit about how to be more spiritual. Now, I'm going to do my best to give you some ideas. I have to say that until recently, I hadn't thought very much about spirituality at all. So now I'm definitely in catch-up mode. So what sparked my interest? It was a conference that I went to over a year ago, and one of the keynote speakers was Uri Geller, who you may have heard of. He is famous for bending spoons, which probably isn't a very useful skill to have, but it certainly brought him a lot of success. He's been introduced to many world leaders and is an influential person in his own right. And of course, he does more than bend spoons. So he's definitely a showman, by the way, and people sort of sometimes discredit him for that and say, well, he's just a showman. Well, he is. He's a brilliant showman. But trust me, there's more to Uri Geller than that. How do I know? Because it was he, as I mentioned, who fired my interest in spirituality. And he made a comment during this lecture, this talk, that resonated with me. And I thought, well, I'm going to write him an email and just tell him how it triggered some thoughts of my own. And I'm going to tell him a couple of what those were. And I never actually expected to get a reply. So there I was, typing away, sent it off. 5 minutes later, inbox, bing, and it's a reply from Uri Geller. Now, I didn't look at it straight away because by then I was thinking about something else, and I thought that's an auto-response email. How wrong could I be? It actually was Uri, and he had replied immediately. And he said, I'm in a meeting at the moment, I can't talk, but call me on this number in 1 hour and 20 minutes, which is what I did. And we had quite a long chat on a lot of different subjects. And the comment that I liked, that inspired me really, was his story about how he became more spiritual. And he was living in New York at the time. His career at that time was not going very well, and he didn't feel very good about himself either. And as it happened, he was living in the same block of flats as John Lennon, who I'm sure we all know about. And they bumped into each other as they were going out of the apartment. And John said, how are you doing today, Uri? He said, actually, John, as you ask, I'm not good. I just don't feel good about the way my life's going, and I've lost my way, and I'm struggling. Words to that effect. And John said, what you need is spirituality. So Uri says, okay, I probably do, but how do I find it? Where do I get it? And he said, you've got to go to Japan. They're very spiritual there. You've got to go to Mount Fuji, and you've got to live there for 6 months. And then when you come back, you will know what spirituality is. So Uri said, okay. Well, he didn't actually do it. But he did go to Japan for 6 weeks. I think he went to Mount Fuji, but it was for only 6 weeks. It wasn't for 6 months. But he felt that was enough, and it had changed his life. So when you start to think about things like spirituality, and when you start to listen to comments like that from Uri, and in our conversations, he shared more information with me, and he was very interested in all the things that I was doing, which was polite. But I did get the feeling that he really was interested, and I was definitely interested in all the questions that I could ask him. I mentioned in the show last week that I just finished reading an incredible book, and I don't say this very often about a book, but it's one that inspired me, and I'm certain to read it again. And here it is. Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning by Viktor Frankl. First of all, I wouldn't get this book, Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning, unless you're really into psychology or psychotherapy. I would get the one that he wrote first, called Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist, and he, during the Second World War, spent 3 years as an inmate of the worst concentration camps, and survived the experience. But to say that it was extreme suffering is an understatement. But he came out of it a wiser man, and he believes that he found out what was the difference between those who survived these experiences and those who didn't. And he said it's all because we're searching for meaning. And as a psychiatrist, all of his clients, not those that came from concentration camps, but he adopted pretty much the same approach with all of them. He called it logotherapy. But he said that if meaning is absent from a person's life, then this is a void that is going to be very difficult for them. And it's a terrible thing to sum up a book in 1 or 2 sentences, so I'm going to do it. So I'm guilty, but here we go. I do it because even if you don't remember anything else from this show, you just might find this has a lot of resonance for you. He says, Human existence is always directed to something or someone other than itself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter lovingly. And then in one of the following sentences, he says, the more he forgets himself, and herself, I'm sure, the more he forgets himself, giving himself to a cause or another person, the more human he is. Because he would say, I would say in my words, that the default state for human beings is that that's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to have a meaning. We're supposed to have a calling for something. And if we don't have that, then we have a calling to at least another person. People who come to me with anxiety and depression and stuff like that, one of the things that I'd say is, look, I know how bad it is to feel like that, but get out of the house. Just go around and see somebody. Just go and have a chat to somebody. Better still, see if there's somebody you can help, if you can do a little job for them, because it will make you feel better, strangely enough. So I could go on and on about spirituality. As I said, it's way above my pay grade, so I think I've said enough. I'll leave the rest to you and to the massive power of your unconscious mind. But just a couple of more things before I go. First of all, as you know, these webinars are free and will continue to be so, and all my YouTube videos on YouTube, etc. But I do have coaching programs where I try to make a bit of money. Some of them you think, I bet they're too expensive, and they might be for me if I had to pay for them. But I have programs to suit hopefully all pockets. And the introductory program that I roll out twice a year, and this is about the time I do it, is priced at $99, which I know might be a mouthful for some, but hopefully it's more affordable and less than you'd spend going for a day out or a weekend away, I'm sure, depending on where you live. What will you get? You'll get a 28-day program paced at your speed. You will get email access to me. It will be me who will be replying to you. It will not be a remote assistant or artificial intelligence. It will be me. And during the 28 days, you will have 2 phone calls with me as well, where we can, bounce off all kinds of things. People who've been through this program have done very well. I've only had 1 complaint in 10 years, and I aim to keep it that way. It's a program, as I said, I don't make a lot of money out of when you consider the time I put into it, but it's a program that I have a lot of fun doing it. End of commercial break. Second thing, I did say right at the outset on show 1, I'm pretty comfortable working with TV or radio, being on stage, live events, but I've never done webinars before. I knew it was going to be a learning curve, and I wasn't disappointed, but I'm getting better at it, and that was the whole thing. But as a result of some of my unconscious thinking and some of the comments that I welcome from you, I'm going to make a few little changes, nothing too much. We're still going to be on, same time, same place every week. Some weeks the show will be recorded so that when you sign in, you're going to get a more polished product, hopefully. And they're also going to be a bit shorter. I'm going to aim for 10 minutes because I know some people are busy and 30 minutes can be a stretch. It'll be a stretch for me to keep the shows to 10 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. And if I just go over a little bit, please forgive me in advance. I still welcome you to fire in your questions on air. Even if I'm not actually there, the chances are I will be looking in. And if I can't answer them on air, I will definitely answer them in the following program, because I do love to have your questions. If you can post your questions in advance of the show, that makes it so much easier for me, and I will do my best to answer those in the show. And finally, I'm going to be a bit more organized, and I said the next show is going to be intuition, and then we'll be on to a new series where we're going to be talking about the things that really will, how you can use all of the stuff we've talked about. And I know from seeing enough people that there's about 9 or 10 barriers that get in the way of people getting lucky and achieving their dreams, and we're going to be talking about all of those. Can't plan further ahead, and that's far enough. So thank you for supporting me, especially those who've been with me right from the first show. You've shown a lot of commitment, and I know that some of you are starting to get lucky, and I want more of you to get lucky, and I want you to let me know what you're up to. So until next week, thanks again, And may you find your version of spirituality, and may you find so much of it that some of the excess rubs off on other people, because we all need it. Until then, goodbye.